Okay.
Anchor.
I'm going to start, well, let me just start the timing here.
Oh yeah, who's timing? Gordon. We should get Gordon to do it.
No, Gordon doesn't know it.
In the nicest way possible.
Or should we just put a timer at the front for today?
No, I
actually-
actually got a sheet made that's like just for the times, but I don't.
You want to do the timing, Jordan?
I would rather not though. Because I'll screw it up.
Okay.
Can bang.
5, it's 7.
Okay, so let me just set the time, so I'll do it here, let me just set it.
It's guaranteed Howard's gonna mess it up.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, just time yourself today. Just time yourself.
No, I'm gonna time.
Yours just likes to time himself, so he
But
just,
Pierce
that's why
is
he's
good.
like,
How does
yeah.
that
I
happen?
will-
No, but at the competition, they watch until they know you've seen it, and then they.
Yeah, I will.
Sometimes
Some
they
they
don't.
don't.
Okay, you have 5 minutes right now. First and last minute are protected. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my pleasure to open the House today on an issue that is tremendously important to ensuring that Canada has healthy Canadian citizens, a vibrant economy, and a successful agricultural sector for many years to come. As Prime Minister, I'm going to do a number of things for you today. I'll start off by pointing out what's going wrong today or what's wrong with the status quo. Then about our resolution and its visibility, and then why side government thinks that it needs to change, and why are we having a debate today. And after that, I'll bring forward our team's 3 key contentions. So, Mr. Speaker, what's wrong with the status quo? Or what's happening right now? Or why are we even having a debate today? Right now, the side government feels that excessive red meat consumption is deteriorating health of Canadian citizens. It is taking a toll on health of our general public. And as side government, we propose that be it resolved that Canada places a substantial tax on all red meat and red meat products destined for domestic consumption. So I'll define key terms here. By substantial tax, we mean $10 per kilogram for all red meat and red meat products. By red meat and red meat products, we mean meat that is red when raw, like beef, pork, and lamb. And by domestic consumption, we mean all the meat that is consumed within Canada. So, with our resolution, we believe that this tax will promote sustainable agriculture. With the money that we'll get from these taxes will act as a subsidy for agriculture, but since subsidies take longer time, so for the first year we'll be collecting this tax, or we'll spend the entire first year collecting this tax, and then we'll reallocate the money which we have collected or revenues which we have collected in the form of tax to providing subsidies. Again, our burden of proof here is we want to prove that by discouraging consumption of red meat, we will have a positive environmental impact. So as side government, we have 3 key contentions. First, we want to improve the Canadian health, that is health of Canadian citizens. Second, we want to encourage environmental protection. We want to make sure that we are able to protect our environment, and that is within the best interest of the community as well as the general public. And third, we want to have a positive economic impact on Canadian society. So I'll start off with the very first constructive contention, that is improvement of health of Canadian citizens. So with the implementation of this tax, as per a statistical study conducted by the Regional Health Authority, it will help us to avoid more than 8 million deaths by 2050. So by discouraging meat consumption or by putting a tax in the place where we'll be able to discourage meat consumption, we'll be able to reduce the mortality rate in Canada. Again, as side government, we feel it is our responsibility to make sure that we give priority to our citizens, because no matter whatever businesses are in place or how much successful we are in terms of the corporate sector, if we are not able to protect our community, or if we are not able to do something constructive for the community, then we don't think that that government is effective.
No.
So, Mr. Speaker, what have we covered today? So basically, I've covered 3 constructive contentions. That is, we want to improve Canadian health, we want to encourage environmental protection, and we want to have a positive economic impact. So by improving Canadian health, we also mean that we will also encourage, or by providing subsidies to agriculture, we mean that we'll encourage newer ways of agriculture. We'll encourage sustainable agriculture by promoting farming, as well as encouraging farmers to produce more vegetarian products that will be good for the people. And by discouraging meat consumption, we mean that if a tax is in place, it will put pressure on people to on people to spend money on taxes, spend money on meat that is consumed within Canada.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Uncross your feet.
He's davening too, as well as.
Yeah.
That was really good, Jerry.
That was one of your best.
That was clear. I understood every word you said. Did you notice the lack of pennies? And I was all lined up here. You will have 7 minutes. First minute and last minute are protected.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, we have a side government today that has forgotten that people still need to eat. In society right now, we rely so heavily upon beef, pork, and other red meats, whether it be fast food. These items are staples in our society. And when we place such a huge tax, a tax $10 per kilogram on these meats, we find that not only is it an industry killer, but it adversely affects those consumers and the people who need to eat and eat cheaply most. Now, I would like to move into the burden today, and side government really had to prove to us why taxing red meat was the best way for improving Canadian health under the proposed plan. And they really haven't shown us this burden today, or why on their side they have won. But I would like to move into some refutation. Now, firstly, side government brought up this initial tax of $10 per kilogram. Once again, $10 per kilogram, Mr. Speaker, that is such a huge tax. And when people are raising the prices that much on this meat, which people of course are consuming daily, now all of a sudden they won't be able to afford it. And we will be getting into some of the adverse impacts of that a little bit further on in the speech. But they did talk about how we would be improving Canadian health through this measure, talking about all these terrible impacts of eating beef. But Mr. Speaker, one of the worst parts about beef is the way that we prepare it. When the World Health Organization says beef is a carcinogen, they're saying it's when it's produced to a point where it's not well done. They're saying that beef is harmful because of the way we're cooking it and because of the way we're choosing to consume it. Not at this time. However, if we look towards other meats such as chicken or other alternatives such as fish, when we go to produce these meats and proteins in just as cheap a manner, we will see that we're also producing these quite unhealthily. We're going to be frying that chicken, we're going to be frying that fish, we're going to be pumping out in our industries these animals filled with antibiotics and growth hormones so we can make the most out of this meat, because all of a sudden these other industries can't afford to survive and spread out that cost amongst one another. Yes?
But Mr. Speaker, more importantly, would this not have a positive environmental impact?
Actually, we see that it won't have a positive environmental impact. And we will be getting to that a little bit later on in our speech as well. Because when we see that you're looking at the environment, we see that actually this wouldn't have a negative effect on the environment by imposing your proposed resolution. Because of course, when we are getting rid of red meat, once again, companies, these industries will be looking to cut corners in every way possible. And many of those corners are in the regulations and the way that they produce these animals and produce this meat for consumption. And of course, they will look to the cheapest way to produce it. And the cheapest way, of course, will be harming the environment more. And if we aren't using all of these meats and proteins that are being produced here in Canada, where are we going to be getting our produce from? Yes, we can do some farming here, but lots of the other produce we will be shipping in when all of a sudden all of these industries which have been stabilized in Canada are gone in an instant, and we need to ship these other products in to meet that demand in the short term, having such a large and terrible impact on the environment. But of course, I would like to move in to our contentions today, and my partner will talk about the disproportionate consumption of the taxes that side government is proposing. But I also have two contentions, being the economy, firstly in terms of how beef is a staple in our society, and also the adverse impact on the consumer. Now when I speak about the economy, I mean that of course beef is a staple. We look at maple syrup, we look at Canadian wheat, and Canadian, or especially Alberta beef, is a staple. We have these large established industries here in Canada. It's part of our identity in this large established industry. We have that ideal Canadian farming family where every family member is involved in the production of beef. And all of a sudden, when we're placing this industry-killing tax, we're affecting these families as a whole. These people's livelihoods are gone in an instant, and we saw no plan by side government how we would be helping these families and people who are adversely impacted by these taxes. Now, of course, these people will be affected because beef is a staple. We can't simply get rid of it. There will be backlash from the consumers, backlash hurting the Canadian identity and the functions of our government. But moving on, secondly, we see an adverse impact on the consumer. If we are taxing these producers at the top, of course the cost will trickle down. The consumer will be incentivized to buy foreign products, products that aren't in these large established industries. And the consumers of beef and fast food, where we often see this beef and other red meats, will all of a sudden have to look elsewhere. Many times the people consuming these products are not that wealthy. They can't afford much more than fast food or going out to the store. So by making these products even more expensive, they will be looking to cheaper alternatives. Sorry, not at this time. And when we look to your vegetarian lifestyle and wonderful, healthy plan we want for all Canadians, we see these proteins and vegetables, chickpeas, you name it, that are much more expensive than the beef that we are currently consuming. And of course, when we are impacting the consumers, they won't have this simple choice to consume this instead of beef or these other red meats because it will be more expensive and they simply cannot afford that. We will be affecting Canadian diets. Canadians do not know how to properly prepare these diets. We've seen time and time again, studies show us this, that if people do not know how to prepare these alternative diets, it will simply not work, and side government's plan is null. But what have we seen today? Sorry, I've got a no time signals. Where am I?
No. Anything no time. You haven't got your not in your 1 minute yet.
Okay, well, I was just asking where.
Sorry, you're just about 1 minute left.
Oh, okay, thank you. So what has been said today? Now, we started off by looking at the government's points. It brought up one large point of improving Canadian health. But we have seen and shown once again that many of these health factors are introduced in the way we prepare these meats and prepare these foods. If we simply move to chicken and other products, we'll just be producing them in another cheap, efficient way that is not good for Canadian health. People will go to that cheapest measure and not follow along with that tax, simply affecting their health just the same, if not worse, than it did before. And then we brought up our point of the economy and talked about how beef is a staple in Canada, and hurting these large established industries would leave a hole in our markets and the people who rely on those incomes. And also we talked about the consumer who cannot afford anything better and cannot simply learn how to make that other lifestyle work when these red meats are currently the cheaper option in fast food restaurants, you name it. And for these reasons, on-side opposition, this resolution must and will fall. Thank you.
Stop. Shut up. Okay, one of the things I just wanted to comment, why am I only seeing one person trying to ask questions here?
Okay, well, so there's that.
Yeah, wake up.
Okay. Good? Good. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, before I begin, I would like to note that I'm not actually afraid of POIs, and if the opposition does offer any during non-protected time, I would be happy to take them. Also, I'd like to emphasize that this House
is committed to discouraging the consumption of red meat, and this is because it will have a positive impact on the environment, Mr. Speaker. I cannot stress this enough. Now, today, as the second Speaker of the government, I was prepared to talk about the environmental protection that this resolution would allow. Our second point of 3, improving the health of Canadian citizens, the environmental protection that I'll cover, and the economic impact that my third partner will cover. But, Mr. Speaker, the opposition has tried to run us askew, and so I will need to cover a couple quick things before getting into my constructive points. The Leader of the Opposition, first and foremost, brought up this fact that they thought our burden was to improve the health of Canadian citizens. No, Mr. Speaker, this is a positive effect of protecting the environment. So they did try to take you down that rabbit hole, but do not follow them. This is just a positive effect of protecting the environment. The Leader of the Opposition also brought up this concept that fast food is a heavily relied upon item in Canada because it's cheap and people need to eat. And that's why it's very important that we do not put such a crippling tax on red meat products. But, Mr. Speaker, would it not be better to improve the health of these Canadian citizens by subsidizing, as the Prime Minister said, agricultural products so that healthy vegetables are an affordable price for people that have a low budget, so that instead of going to McDonald's for their McDouble, they could have vegetables in a stir fry. Or, if they still need to eat at McDonald's, why don't they have a junior chicken? Because that's white meat and will not be taxed. So that sort of solves the fast food issue. Moving on, the opposition seemed to think that $10 per kilogram was, just a second, sir, was too much of a tax to place on this item. But I'll remind you, Mr. Speaker, that we do not want people to pursue this. We want it to be crippling to the point that people are heavily discouraged from buying any red meat at all. This is where we will see the impact and the benefits coming into play. Would you not agree?
I would not. Mr. Speaker, how does side government believe that people who are accustomed to eating meat will suddenly be able to make a stir fry that satisfies all of their health needs?
Well, I don't see how that disagrees with the point I was talking about, but I will get to that. While I'm there, Mr. Speaker, people still have the choice to eat meat. If they're accustomed to eating meat, they still can, for an extra $10 per kilogram. If that's too heavy a price to pay, then you can move on to white meats, or fish, or you can choose to eat healthier and have vegetables, or fruits, or grains. And they also seem to think that people just move to imports and purchase a bunch of foreign goods. But I will remind you, Mr. Speaker, that this tax is on consumption. If McDonald's imports a bunch of beef from the States, the price of their McDoubles will still go up because we tax this at the point of consumption, when the beef is consumed, when the hamburger is purchased, not when it's brought across the border, Mr. Speaker. No thank you, not at this time. The other point that the opposition brought up was that this would somehow harm farmers. And this is true for livestock and Alberta beef. This would harm them. But how difficult, Mr. Speaker, is to turn 100 acres of grass that you're using to raise cows or cattle into a field of wheat? Not very hard, Mr. Speaker. You've got all this open land, and by subsidizing agriculture, all of these livestock farmers will now be able to move into the agricultural industry. And it's because we will be subsidizing them, they will be profitable, and they have this opportunity. Last, Mr. Speaker, the opposition illustrated our point perfectly through the trickle-down effect of placing this price on consumption, that it will just be passed on to the consumers. And that's exactly why we are passing this, Mr. Speaker. By passing it on to consumers, it will discourage them from purchasing meats. And that's what we are trying to achieve. I'll now get into my own constructive on environmental protection, which is why we are here today, Mr. Speaker. This is the root of our argument. Now, livestock accounts for 14% of greenhouse gas emissions. This is a huge number. And a vegetarian diet would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by more than 50%. And we realize that not everybody is going to become a vegetarian because of this resolution, but it will encourage them and it will nudge them in this direction. So while we might not see that exact number, it will be headed in the right direction. And on that, Mr. Speaker, it uses far less energy to grow agricultural products. Why? Because when we grow livestock, what do? We grow agricultural products and then we feed them to our livestock over 5 to 10 years. Mr. Speaker, that's ridiculous. Why are we growing food and then feeding our food to something that we're then going to eat later? We've given them 5 to 10 years worth of food for a couple of steaks, Mr. Speaker? No, this seems ridiculous when we're trying to protect the environment. When we're emitting greenhouse gases to the point where it's causing the ice caps to melt, we need to cut back somehow and we need to start heading in the right direction. And this is how we're going to do that. This is taking the first step. No, we're not saying that people are not allowed to eat red meat anymore. We're pushing them in the right direction. And furthermore, Mr. Speaker, let's look at how these animals are treated. In Canada, we have pretty good legislation, but again, they talked about how industries are cutting corners, and they're cutting corners right now, Mr. Speaker. In cattle raising and in the raising of pigs, they're crammed into tight spaces, they're mistreated, they're psychologically and physically abused, and this is not okay. Animals have feelings too, and we need to be protecting them, their physical and mental well-being. It might taste better if you torture a duck before you kill it, but it's very inhumane. And in Canada, we have standards, and that falls far below the standards that we set. That's not okay. And this will be discouraging that by encouraging agricultural consumption. So, for these reasons, Mr. Speaker, the positive impact on health of Canadian citizens, the environmental protection that this will cause, and the economic impact on Cornwall will cause. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We got like a longer thing to ring. Could it ring for 20 seconds?
I don't know what the hell. This alarm doesn't like to go off. Shut up. Bobby. Shut up! Boy, very good. I hate these electronic devices. I like the old metronome. I was going to just give him a compliment. Very good, except the only thing I really was grossed out by is how old your cattle were.
Wait, how old did cattle get, guys? Not 5 to 10 years?
No.
I have no idea.
How old?
2?
2 at the most.
Are you serious?
There you go. That's what
I thought I was
shot in the dark.
I thought milk though.
As I didn't know.
Like if you grow a cow for milking, how long does it?
No,
milk?
Don't
no,
grow
no.
a cow, just by the way. You don't grow a
I was lucky I didn't say grow up there.
You
did.
Did
Yes.
I? Oh.
You raised.
You really-
I said raised once. I said raised.
You were raised by your parents. You weren't grown by them.
So if you raise a cow for milking, how long does it live?
If you're keeping it as a milk cow, for maybe a decade or so.
Yeah. See, that's what I meant. I mean,
A decade for a milk cow?
Oh, they go on for a while.
Yeah,
Yeah, they go on
kill
for a
it for
while.
steak.
No.
No, but you can only raise, like, do you decide, like, this is a steak cow, this is a milk cow?
Well, first of all,
you just slaughter the milking cow.
okay. First of all, yes, we have different varieties that we raise for different purposes.
But after you slaughter a dairy cow, do you eat
Yeah.
Sometimes they're recycled as a cheap grade of hamburger.
recycle?
Release created.
Now you're cursing
Well,
me
it's
out.
better. It's better than stuffing them full of chemicals and then putting them in a box and burying them.
Yeah.
Why would?
But yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you, Gary.
Changing. Welcome to the
I was
message.
learning so much
Okay.
about cows.
I would have taken another PMI if you'd offered more than 2.
Okay. Thank you. But yeah.
Better than that.
But your spirit is really good tonight. I think it's great. Okay. Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So in my speech to you today, I'm going to try to do 2 things. Firstly, I'm going to go over an extensive refutation of the government side and show you why, in fact, this resolution won't accomplish what government side is trying to accomplish. And then secondly, I'm going to go over our second main contention of this debate and really prove to you how this tax is going to be unfairly implemented and also how it won't really work in the end of the day. But let's get right into the refutation here. So I want to point out, before I start anything, one major flaw that we've seen overarching the government side, and that entire thing is that they're, for some reason, under this belief that if we get rid of the beef industry, if we cripple it like they have suggested, that we're going to switch from beef to veggies. That it's going to go from raising cows to now all of a sudden growing crops. But we actually don't think that that's the right train of thought to follow. I think, in fact, we're not actually replacing it with any crops at all. We're actually just going to have like more chickens and other types of meat that exist. No, thank you. And we're not really going to be getting people healthier at all. Because as my partner is going to discuss to you in his next speech, it's not actually how the beef itself that's unhealthy. You can get healthy beef. You can make it healthy. The issue is with how we cook it. So if we don't cook it healthy anymore, and we just cook it like in hamburgers, and we cook it improperly like how we do, we can do the exact same thing with chicken, and the fact that we're just going to be replacing the beef with chicken will allow us to make it just as unhealthy. We don't think people's health is going to increase. No, thank you. So additionally to that, we say that in essence, in itself, crippling the beef industry is a problem. We'd say that it's a huge industry in Canada. It's one of our staple industries, as my partner has described. It has thousands of jobs. Sure, I'll take your hand.
But by subsidizing the agriculture industry, would that not allow them to switch over from beef to agriculture as opposed to chicken or anything
Right,
else?
but the point is that the market isn't decided by the government in this case. It's decided by the consumer. The consumer doesn't want to buy a million vegetables that isn't going to provide their protein. They want to buy a source of protein, and that's going to come from chicken. So no matter how many subsidies you give to the agricultural sector, the products that they're making aren't going to be bought. It's going to be chicken. That's where the money's going to be ultimately going. So we see that if we do cripple the beef industry, we're not going to be increasing the agricultural section. Some of these jobs, a marginal amount, will go to these chickens, but essentially we're having thousands of jobs and a huge industry being essentially eradicated immediately, and now these people can't even afford to eat. We've lost a huge section of our economy, and we'd say that that's detrimental, and crippling the beef industry is not the way to go. Secondly, we'd say that it's not that easy to convert farmland like they've suggested, so I don't think that's something that we should brush off, the idea that these people can just convert all of a sudden their huge field where they had cows into a field where they have wheat. And also we'd say that a field of cows is much more profitable than a field of wheat. So there's that to be thought of. And then lastly, we heard the point about environment. And we've heard about how a good production of emissions is coming from cows. And what we say to that is essentially that even though we're not domestically selling this beef and consuming this beef, there's no reason that we can't start exporting it. So essentially, if we're talking about the fact that they don't want their beef industry to cripple, they're going to be finding every possible scenario that they can work to continue this beef industry. And I think that one way of doing that is actually exporting the beef. And that means that we're not actually minimalizing any environmental impacts, because the methane that's being produced from these cows is still being produced if the beef is being exported. There's no clause in here that says that that can't be done, and we think that simply there'd be the same number of cows, or maybe even more cows if we're exporting this beef and it's doing well. So we'd say that based on the excellence of our Canadian beef, I think that on its own merit it can exist if we export it, and that's all that's going to happen. We're going to see absolutely no environmental increase, and if anything, we'll probably see more because we'll have to ship our beef further than we are right now. So for that point, I think that the resolution falls right there and in itself. No, thank you. Actually, no, I'll take it, yeah.
So, Mr. Speaker, is the side opposition suggesting that industrial profits are more important than the health of Canadian citizens?
No, of course not, but the burden here has been told to us that it's not health anymore, because we've already proven to you that health isn't being improved. What we've been told is that the burden lies on the side of environment, and what we're saying is that the environment is not being improved with this resolution, because we're just going to export our beef and have the same number of cows in Canada, and now we'll also have the emissions of shipping. So there's that, we're not improving anything. So let's go right into this contention I'm going to bring forth, and that's the idea of the precedent essentially that we're setting, and also those direct impacts of the precedent. So first of all, what kind of tax are we instituting when we tax red meat? Or when we tax really any food, and in this case specifically red meat? I'd say what essentially comes down to is a fat/poor tax, right? We're disproportionately taxing a group of people based on what they consume. So I think that the majority of people that are consuming, let's say, a huge quantity of red beef to the point where it's that negatively impacting their health, tend to be people who just like to eat, who enjoy eating. We'd say that that's bodybuilders, foodies, people who like to eat out a lot. I'd say that the fact that we're taxing their food disproportionately is pointing that at that market and suggesting to them that they don't know how to take care of themselves. They don't know how to lead a healthy lifestyle just because they buy beef. My partner's going to discuss later to you how, in fact, you can lead a very healthy lifestyle consuming beef. I'd say in the old days, everyone ate beef essentially every day, and we don't see this huge increase of heart attacks that we do today, even though we have that knowledge and there are alternatives, and people aren't eating beef every day. I say that the actual problem is how it's being cooked, but my partner will discuss more of that in the next speech. Additionally, I'd say that moreover, we're setting this precedent that people really don't know how to take care of themselves. And so what we're telling people is that they're not educated enough. But the issue here is that they're not educated and they don't have that education level to know that beef isn't good for them or whatever. They also don't know the proper way to cook the foods that they do get. So if they are making a stir fry, they're not just using a little bit of oil, they're using a whole jug of oil. And they're making it just as unhealthy as they would be if they were eating beef in the first place. So I think we're just disproportionately taxing people for absolutely no reason, based on maybe their education level or based on their preferences of food. And then lastly, we're putting on this poor tax. I think the fact that people need to eat, I think that oftentimes beef tends to be a cheaper alternative. I think that you find it at fast food, restaurants, stuff like that, that's cheaper. And I think that you're disproportionately taxing the poor. I think you're not benefiting the environment. You're creating a less healthy Canada and a less economically well Canada. And for that reason, the resolution must fall. Thank you.
What did he get the penny for?
Oh, it wasn't in everyone speaking, but it was a factual thing I wanted to point out. That in the European diet, meat was really not it was not a common food for most people until about 200 years ago. So for example, the beef eaters, you know, the Royal Guard in London, these people were so elite. They were not only soldiers, but they were being fed meat, and that was part of the distinction. So the European diet, until really recently, was far more meatless. So we go back to this.
I found you a penny.
Well, thank you very much. They're like dinosaurs. Someday we'll find it. We'll find it.
It's behind your chair.
Okay, I'll find it. It's not, I'll get it. I have lots. We can go there. So I just wanted to. But basically, your speaking is fine.
I'm really worried about your speaking, JJ.
Well, I think he's worried about it, those test tubes, that he looks at, They may have corrupted his.
Yeah, because that's a leap. Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, let's just go back and repeat the resolution and repeat what our values are on side government and what we stand for and why, so far, this debate has lended itself to side government and our plan. So the resolution. Be it resolved, Canada places substantial tax on all red meat and red meat products destined for domestic consumption. I'm going to start off with the refutation. Side opposition was appalled at the tax. $10 per kilogram. Oh my goodness, Mr. Speaker. How could Canadians do this? How could we, as the House, impose this type of tax? It's exactly like my partner said. This type of tax is meant to deter. We don't want a marginal tax that might impact you. Maybe you might think a little bit about your consumption of red meat. No, we want this tax to be substantial. We want this tax to teach Canadians, to show them that there is a reason that we are taxing red meat. And the reasons being, which we have outlined on side government, reasons being the effect it has on Canadian health, the effect it has on the environment, and lastly, the economic impact that will come from reducing the consumption of red meat. Yes?
If your goal really was to abolish, essentially stop people from eating meat, why not just ban it altogether?
Thank you, thank you, side opposition. Mr. Speaker, the reason we wouldn't abolish red meat completely is kind of what side opposition hinted at, that even imposing a tax such as this would cause a revolt among the Canadian citizens. So can does side opposition honestly think that this is a feasible tactic to abolish red meat completely? No, it's not. So that's why we're not suggesting this on side government. It's not a feasible option for us. That won't help Canadians, and this type of tax will. We are giving them the option. You can still consume red meat if you wish, but we are reducing that consumption. And we have facts and reasons for reducing that consumption. And this is what my partners have spoken to, and this is what I will speak to. So now to continue in on my refutation, a point has been brought up a couple times, once in a POI by side opposition, and in both of their speeches actually, that Canadians need protein. And without red meat, where are they going to get protein? Chicken. That's an option. But further than just meat, does side opposition think that vegetarians live without protein? That vegans survive without protein? There are other protein options, Mr. Speaker, that are healthier for Canadians to consume, healthier for the environment to produce. Mr. Speaker, there are numerous options. Red meat is not the only one. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, these vegetarians and vegans are people who live, eat, and sleep this lifestyle. How does side government propose that the average meat eater will suddenly be able to adopt this lifestyle and actually get all of the health benefits they need from vegetables?
Mr. Speaker, side opposition is missing the point completely. They are under the conception that vegetarians and vegans are some extreme radical group. And honestly, Mr. Speaker, that's kind of offensive. Mr. Speaker, when we look at this group of people who have decided to eat a healthier lifestyle, live a healthy lifestyle, learn more about the food that they're consuming, why are we saying that these people live, eat, and breathe their beliefs? Perhaps they just realize that red meat isn't the best option for them. Perhaps, maybe they're pescatarian, Mr. Speaker. I don't know. There are many options, and for side opposition to be as naive to think that vegetarians and vegans don't consume protein and only live off vegetables, it's a little scary over on side government to hear that. So now that I've kind of covered that point in its entirety, I'm going to continue with just a couple last points of my refutation before I go into my our final point on side government. And that is, the speaker before me spoke about how this is disproportionately taxing the poor. It is a fat and poor tax, Mr. Speaker. And also went on to say that this is telling people that they don't know how to eat. So it's telling foodies that they don't know how to eat. It's telling bodybuilders that they don't know how to eat. So now we're taxing foodies, we're taxing bodybuilders, we're taxing fat, we're taxing poor, we're taxing Canadians, Mr. Speaker. We're not taxing one individual group, we're taxing Canadians as a whole. Bodybuilders don't know how to eat, they only eat red meat. No, bodybuilders eat chicken as a lean protein, which is another point side opposition brought up, that the food will just be prepared unhealthy. That people are just going to deep fry all their chicken once we start taxing red meat at a high level. Mr. Speaker, this is ridiculous. When we look at the health, the nutrient levels of red meat compared to chicken, we see that chicken is a leaner protein as it is. So regardless of the way it's being prepared, we're not deep frying all of the chicken. Yes?
Can you not prepare beef in a way that makes it healthy, like buying 99% lean ground beef?
Yes, you can, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, you can prepare beef in a way that makes it healthy. You can also prepare chicken in a way that makes it healthy. But as my partner spoke to in the environmental impact, preparing the beef that you are going to be eating, that is having an environmental impact. So regardless of whether or not you've prepared it healthily, and yes, maybe people consume it in moderation, but side opposition is under the belief that these people that are eating red meat are only eating red meat. If you're consuming this type of product in moderation, this tax will not be that detrimental to you. If you already know how to eat in moderation, you'll be okay. This tax is addressing those people who are basing their unhealthy lifestyles off of consuming multiple burgers a day. That's what we're looking at. So now, after this refutation, I'd like to get into my constructive point, which is the economic impact that this will have. So, my first speaker mentioned that the impact on Canadian health from the consumption of red meat. And so let's look at the economic impact of that. If we reduce the consumption of red meat, we improve Canadian health, we reduce healthcare costs, Mr. Speaker. That is a fact. We reduce the impact that this type of lifestyle is having on our Canadians' health, and we reduce our healthcare costs. But also, let's look at this other option with the economic impact, which was brought up by our subsidies. By subsidizing the agricultural market, we are going to be increasing agricultural production. This will lead to an increase in the production of wheat, all agricultural products, and this will provide more profits to the Canadian country. So, Mr. Speakers, for the three reasons of Canadian health, environmental protection, and economic impact, that this resolution shall and will stand. Thank you.
Now, I think at this point here, I want to take a break because, again, we're doing 2, 3. All right. SideGov, where Leah's coming up here in this new format, I think she could have really dropped 2 A-bombs here. And they're the 2 ones that I think that she could do. The first one is, we're trying to change the bad behavior of the people. We have been somewhat successful with tobacco. There are people who want to smoke. How do we get people to move away from smoking? Largely by taxing the hell out of it. So that is improving a better public, regardless of how people felt attached to the habit. Far more addictive, I'm sure, than beef. The second one wasn't clearly brought out by Devin as it could have been. If he actually had the numbers, it takes 7 times the caloric intake of grain to make 1 pound of caloric equivalent to a pound of beef as to directly eat the grain or the legume. So that one could, if one moved into a diet that was based on grains and legumes rather than beef, that would free up the proportion, 6/7 of the land used. That would mean that land being put into other forms of agricultural production would lower the price of other foodstuffs. So there'd be a drastic price change. Second, so those would be so you're actually saying that we're going to be lowering, without any redistribution of funds coming into the government, going out of the government, just simply the impact on prices, moving away from the very high cost of beef production. And then the environmental. Here's a change that we're going to make healthier Canadians. We are going to be making agriculture more sustainable, and we're making the environment. We're going to have, and the positive impact is going to be on the environment. But number one, we want to break the habit and keep coming back to, because Pierce left the opposition on, we are disturbing people, what they want to do in a free market. Here you're saying we're not simply commanding people, we're giving them the market signals, but we're taking the knowledge base that government has to transform the population. Again, you're bringing it back to the argument, does a free market yield the optimal social result? When you let people just, little children demand ice cream for 3 times a day for their meals? Or does the guiding hand using distortions in the marketplace that as a form of gentle regulation change the behavior so you have an activist government? And you bring it back to that central issue. So this is the same argument you would have if you were arguing about the diet soda, the Bloomberg resolution. The same argument you would have when you talk about taxing, increasing taxes on gasoline to further innovate more high energy.
The environmental impact of soda from the aluminum cans and strip mining, or?
The environmental, well, mostly the health impact rather than the environmental one. We're not talking about the amount of gas that people were passing, even though it would be carbon dioxide. Okay.
Do I have 2 at the end?
Yeah,
Or
you
is
can
it
have
1
one.
on 1?
You can have whatever you want. What do you want?
No, but I mean, what is,
So you're,
what is that JDC?
you're the last speaker, right?
Okay, so you're so you're the third speaker on government right now. You're not. So you're playing two different
Yeah, but
characters.
at the competition, are you going to bang me at 2 or 1?
So, at the competition, you'll have 1 minute to speak, 3 more minutes to speak, 1 minute to speak, 2 minutes to speak.
You're gonna get more banged there than you would at an orgy.
Is that not right? Because you're essentially doing 2 things, right? You have 1 speaking slot, and then your last speaking slot.
It's all together.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, but he's breaking. No. With Gordon, we don't know how the signals are going to be
Oh, okay.
because Gordon is actually raising a question. We know how they have managed the 7 minutes.
Well,
I'm telling you that
We should find out.
no, I'm telling you, I found out.
oh,
But like your last 2
Oh.
minutes, it's protected 1 minute, another protected 2 minutes. It's just to signal you
so I get a
that your
protected-
function is changing from the 5-minute function to the 2-minute function.
So I get it protected at both ends of the 5 and then a protected
Yeah.
2?
So you get a protected 3.
we have 3
So and I
minutes to
sent,
give
and
you like 4
I think like
lines.
if you look at, there's some
Yeah.
sort of timing sheet that I
Yeah.
sent.
Well,
I don't know.
they all have it right there in front of them.
Okay. Reinventing debate each year. Okay.
Okay, so we have 3 minutes to each give you 2 POIs.
Perfect.
Bad lies.
Okay, this is going to. Yeah, so this is going to be a lot of banging going on here.
Yeah. Should I time myself for this? Or
You-
No,
Or-
love
or-
timing
You should
yourself.
get used to having other people.
Yeah,
time.
that's true, don't get used to having.
Yeah, but
No, I know, but
this
it's-
one is
They
so
won't always
nutty.
get time signals. They won't
This
always
one-
give them to you.
This
They'll give them
this
track
one
days
is going to
each.
be so nutty.
What?
So this particular role where there's so much banging going on.
Yeah.
So this one here,
I can do it.
you can do. Okay, so you'll do the.
So it's a minute?
And give me the numbers too.
No,
No. you
Why?
don't.
They give us the
You don't.
numbers at
they
JDC.
don't roll
They
it.
don't.
They hold up to
No,
They
but
give
sometimes
you-
they'll do
they
it
give
so
you-
quick that
they
you
give
won't
you
see
like-
it.
They give you 5 and 3, I think.
Like you
They
can't
don't give you
kinda
all.
anticipate that they will and base yourself around that, like you need to practice without it because sometimes the timers suck and you have no idea where you are.
Or I can do time. I can do the banging, because then you can ask the guys.
That's not fair. That's just because you like banging.
Moving on.
That's what Apple Watches are for.
My dad got it for his birthday, and he doesn't use it. So.
Huh?
My dad got it for his birthday, doesn't use it, so I took it.
Okay. And now you're stuck with it.
You know, it's a watch.
Okay, debate.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On-site opposition today, we've broken the government's case down into 2 different scenarios. Firstly, the beef industry dies completely. People are going to be out of jobs, industries will suffer, just as side government said would happen with this crippling tax. But we also looked at another scenario, one where the beef industry continues, as they somehow also suggested on-site government, with all of these exports going out from Canadian beef producers. With this, we would see the environmental impacts worsen, with the emissions going up for every piece of beef which is shipped overseas. And of course, if we're hurting people's health and hurting the environment in the process, we have nullified site government's case with both of these scenarios. But I would like to move into my last contention at this point, and we'll wrap up my speech by going through some refutation of what we have heard brought forth today. Now, I do have one main contention of health to bring forward in terms of the consumer and producer. Now, firstly, I would like to talk about the consumer. Of course, people can just go and make unhealthy food at home, and people will likely continue to do so if they do already. If they're cooking their beef rare, I'll take you in just a moment, they will just produce their chicken fried, battered, their pork fried, their fish fried, you name it. If people are producing things unhealthily at home, they won't simply change this trend. Mr. Speaker.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there will always be a demand for beef, so it will not die completely. But would a $10 per pound tax not be enough to subsidize the pain and suffering and prevent that?
Although I already presented 2 scenarios at the start of my speech which looked at both of these options, one, of course, hurting these industries and the people involved, crippling the people who rely only on these industries, those farming families, that staple Canadian business. And of course, I also looked once again where the industry continues, and the environmental impact goes up, where people are looking to cut corners in terms of the environment and of course all of those emissions from shipping. But moving back into my contention, if people once again are making unhealthy food at home, they will continue to do so. And when my partner brought up in a point of information that we can get 99% lean beef, that we can prepare beef in a healthy way, we can grill it to be well done in a way that the World Health Organization does recognize is not a carcinogen and healthy, side government gave us a thumbs up. In Barack Obama's famous words, they said, yes, we can. No thank you at this time. Now, of course, with this, they are essentially agreeing with our position that beef can be still provided in a healthy manner. And in the first government speech, we saw a government that was saying we are doing this because it is unhealthy. We are doing this for the health of Canadians. And all of a sudden, if side government is admitting that we can in fact produce beef in a healthy manner, no thank you at this time, then they have lost on their side. Now, if we look towards vegetables, as this wonderful alternative side government has proposed, they of course are a pain to cook and very difficult to keep, both for the consumer and for all of the restaurants who need to store this without those vegetables going bad. With this, we will see an addition of preservatives to these vegetables and grains, things which of course make this type of food even more unhealthy than it already is. And the government that is adamant that people will still have this option to purchase beef, but of course $10, as we mentioned, is nearly the same effect as banning beef, as it will be such a crippling cost. Something that the government said was not feasible, which once again completely contradicts their case. Would you not agree?
No, Mr. Speaker. First, the opposition said that everybody would deep frying things and be unhealthy. Then they said people would healthily eat beef, and these would be the same people that healthily eat chicken. How would you explain this?
I'm explaining this in the same way that side government side has explained it for us today. They are saying that all of a sudden beef is inherently unhealthy, and saying chicken is this wonderful lean protein that people can eat, and people will go eat all of these wonderful vegetables. But as my partner brought up, as they will continue to bring up, consumers are stuck in a trend. People are lazy. They don't want to be preparing vegetables. They're harder to prepare than going out and getting that fast food burger, that fast food deep fried chicken sandwich, which of course is still extremely unhealthy to people's diets. And if we look in terms of health to the producer, how does side government think that land used for pasture can suddenly be turned into land used for crops? Crops need ideal farming situations. A cow or a bison simply needs a chunk of grass. This isn't the same thing, and I wish side government good luck if they feel this way, because freeing up all these extra grains when these beef and cows rather aren't consuming it, of course, with all these extra grains, we won't be left with all these wonderful vegetables. We'll be left with more grain, and well, I hope Canadians like bread. But also, producers will simply bring these other proteins, such as chicken and these other vegetables, down to states where they are more efficient to produce. The industry will shift, begin pumping these chickens and alternative foods with more antibiotics, more preservatives, in order to make them cheaper and more affordable in the market so that they can survive. But at this point, I would like to look at an overall refutation of what has been said today. Now, firstly, we talked lots about this issue of health. But on-site opposition, we proved that this point lands on our side. We talked about how the health of these foods is based in the way it's cooked. We can make chicken and vegetables just as unhealthy. People who aren't in that vegetarian or vegan lifestyle don't know how to simply include that in their lifestyle and still get all of that necessary protein. This is something that people research, people take on themselves at their own choice, not something that they're forced into by these monetary restraints. We also looked overall at the point of the environment. One thing that side government said was extremely important to their case, just as health was. But once again, we saw that if the beef business will continue, as side government is now in their recent POI suggesting it will, the emissions will simply be going up as we continue to ship this beef overseas, making quite an inefficient market when we're producing all of this beef here to try and keep this industry alive, yet shipping it overseas. And of course, even looking at the alternatives that will spring up, we will be using land that isn't really perfect for farming. If we need to farm more, create more crops and vegetables, we're going to be using land that isn't grade A. We're going to be having to put more fertilizers on these crops, more growth additives, more water in order to make these crops grow just like they do on the land that they are already being grown on, which is perfect for the conditions that they need. But lastly, we looked at the economy, and of course with these taxes, it will be detrimental, unfairly impacting the lower class. The lower class now either won't have the money to eat this beef, symbolizing that they won't get the red meat like all of the privileged folks, or all of a sudden they won't be getting the necessary proteins in their lifestyle because they aren't accustomed to eating these vegetables and using it in that way now without any proper education. And for all of these reasons, Mr. Speaker, this resolution must fall. Thank you.
I was surprised you guys didn't touch on the exports more.
Yeah, that was, I didn't even touch on that point, JJ, when you brought that up, because I was like, oh,
We
shit.
thought like that would have been like, that was like the nail in the coffin.
But like, your number one point was that people just eat fried chicken.
Yeah, I just
So-
understand
so
those
the
main
chicken.
points.
The point was that like beef is not inherently unhealthy.
Yeah.
No,
Wait,
but it's-
wait,
but it's-
wait.
But it's
I
less
want- I
healthy than
want you-
chicken.
Let's just
Oh,
do
wait.
You
it.
want to talk about the science here?
I mean, I could. I mean, well, the point is just that we.
Oh,
Oh wait, is there someone wants to speak? Shall I speak?
Yeah, he had,
I go after.
Okay, there's only
Let
2
me-
minutes.
let me-
Yeah.
he has a 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, side opposition, for your points. So as side government, we feel that opposition is more biased towards the industrial side of things. They want to give priority to profits or industrial profits. They believe that beef is staple to Canada. This clearly shows that they're more concerned about making profits from industry that is related to beef or like red meat products. As side government, we don't agree with this. Opposition doesn't even considers beef as a cheaper alternative, which shows their complete bias or orientation towards profits. They believe that government should not do anything for bringing a change. As side government, we believe that even if our proposal can have a minimal impact in doing something constructive for the society, we will feel that we have done something good for the community, or we have accomplished something as a side government. They want to discourage farming as they believe that our Canadian land is quite unproductive. But as side government, we think positively. We have a different approach. We are giving public an option. People can consume meat, but they'll have to pay more for that. The tax is for those people who are basing their lifestyle on excessive consumption of meat. As side government, we want to save or we want to reduce the healthcare costs we have. And we want to subsidize our agriculture industry by promoting products that are more centered in agriculture. And with the redistribution of funds, we want to discourage meat consumption. We want to use, as a government, we want to use our intellectual knowledge to transform our society constructively and make sure that that we work for the general benefit or the overall benefit of the public. Thank you.
You left half a minute practically.
So what's the science, JJ?
I mean, so technically it's right, beef is a fattier food than would be like chicken.
Wait a minute. I want to go a little bit further than the fat content. There's 2 types of muscle.
Protein.
No, there's 2 types of muscle. You have fast twitch and slow twitch muscle. And I forget what the 2 types of muscle.
One's white, one's dark meat.
Exactly.
Actually, I thought you were born with fast twitch or slow twitch muscles.
No, you have a combination.
So you can, especially when they raise cows, you can. But I don't think that applies to beef. No.
No.
That applies to chicken.
Wait a minute.
Right.
So hold on a second here. So the question is, when you look at different types of dead animals, some tend to be whiter and some redder.
Yeah.
And it really has to do with the balance between those 2 types of muscles. So then, in fact, what happens is the red fiber. You don't look like your coat anymore.